Okay, it's now 6 o'clock, 6 p.m. UK time, and it's time to start this live event. Um, as people join us from around the world. As I say, it's 6 o'clock here in the UK, and it's a very hot, sunny afternoon, so it's delightful. Probably a bit too hot, but let's not complain about it. This will take, or I will talk for 15 minutes or so, and then people are more than welcome to ask questions, and I'll do my very best to answer anything you might wish to ask. Um, what we're talking about today is exactly what diabetes is. I think, frankly, a better name for diabetes would be to call it sugar disease, because that's what causes it. It's caused by sugar. Quite simply, our bodies, our metabolisms become overwhelmed by the amount of sugar in our diet. So, hello, my name is Graham, and I'm talking about this today because I've been through this and I've come out the other side. I have got myself into remission from type 2 diabetes. I've got my weight down, so I'm now in my healthy BMI range, and I feel very well. And I'm hoping I can help you do the same too. Now, this sugar disease, diabetes, this is a tsunami, a health tsunami, which the world is facing. Let me give you some data from 2016. So this is quite old data now, and frankly, it will be worse. Of adults in the United States, 50% are either type 2 diabetics or pre-diabetic. That means they're on the way to getting diabetes. A further 10 or 15% is estimated are actually insulin resistant. So that goes insulin resistance to pre-diabetic to diabetic. So that's something like about 65% of the United States adult population has a problem with diabetes. That's just extraordinary. Europe will be much the same, and the rest of the world is catching up fast. As I say, this is a major health issue which we're all facing. And it comes down to our diets. Basically, that is the long and the short of it. If we go back in time, back to when we were hunter-gatherers on the plains of Africa, our ancient ancestors ate very few carbohydrates because they just weren't available. Yes, there was some fruit, maybe some root vegetables, but the bulk of their diet would have been fats, lots of animal fats, fish fats, etc., and protein. Again from eating animals and fish. And that's what our bodies are designed to eat. A lot of these hunter-gatherers would have been in a state of what's called ketosis. Now, we don't have time to go into that today, but that means they basically lived off ketones as opposed to living off glucose and sugar. And they were very healthy for it, very healthy indeed. And our systems, our metabolism, is still designed to eat that same sort of diet. But what we eat today is very, very different. Having to walk 10 or 20 miles in a day to go and hunt your food is very different from sitting in your car and going to a local fast food restaurant to have it your meal handed through the window. Now, we're going to cover carbohydrates in particular today, but let's just start and put this in context first of all. Excuse me. There are three types of macronutrients. It's carbohydrate, there are fats, and there are proteins. It's the carbohydrates we're talking about today, because that's where the sugar is. Because all these three types of macronutrients, the body deals with very differently. And when we have a look at carbohydrates, there are actually three types of carbohydrate. There is whole-grained breads, whole-grained carbohydrates, which is whole-grain breads, brown rice, starchy vegetables. Refined carbohydrates, that's when really most of the goodness has been taken out and you're left with white flour, white bread, pasta, pizza, the sort of batter and breadcrumb you get on fish. And then finally, you have sugar, and that's just plain sugar. And that's what you find in and on donuts, and same likewise with biscuits and cakes and ready meals and low-fat yogurts. So there are your three types. and they get progressively worse as you go down from 1 to 3. Now, all these 3 types of carbohydrate contain sugar. It is the case that the unrefined carbohydrates, yes, they contain sugar. It doesn't get absorbed as quickly by the blood as the other 2, but all the same, it causes a spike in your glucose, blood sugar, which then causes a spike in the insulin. And that's what this is all about, is insulin being out of control. It spikes insulin, because then what happens is that insulin is released by the pancreas in response to all this, just being overwhelmed with so much sugar, and the cells become insulin resistant. They just don't respond to the insulin anymore. The pancreas has to produce even more insulin to try to get the cells to take up the glucose. Eventually, they just don't respond at all. And then so your insulin remains spiked. Do that repeatedly and for long enough, you become pre-diabetic, and then you become diabetic. And of course, what insulin is wonderful stuff. It's terrific at what it does. But in the context of how we treat ourselves now with the diet we're eating and also the lack of exercise, it becomes a major problem. Because what it's doing, when it's in our systems in such high amounts, it makes us hungry, and that's all we need. It stores fat, and then it slows the metabolism. So, it's working against our modern lifestyles. And we have to remember this, that yes, having too much insulin eventually causes diabetes, but then diabetes itself is the forerunner of some really quite nasty diseases. It is the precursor to heart disease. There are other factors in heart disease, but being diabetic is one of the most important. And then that can lead on to cancer, and then finally can lead on to dementia. So being diabetic is something we all need to sort out. Now, carbohydrates, unlike proteins and fats, there's no nutritional necessity for them in our diet. We can get them elsewhere. Now, we don't have time to go into this evening, but people say, well, okay, whole grain breads are really good because they have lots of fiber in them. And they do, sure, but they have a lot of sugar in them in these whole grain breads as well, just like a white loaf does as well. And this fiber, these other nutrients, can be got quite easily from leafy green vegetables. Not so much starchy vegetables, because remember they are full of carbohydrates as well. So, this all being said, you can see how it's this, our body's being overwhelmed with carbohydrate, which is giving us this major health problem. So, in very brief outline terms, again, hopefully this will be helpful for you. Let me suggest to you what I think is the optimum diet, not just if you're diabetic, but if you're any adult, completely healthy adult walking on the planet. And that is, it's a diet which is high in fats, natural healthy fats, a medium amount of protein, and low in carbohydrate. And that's what we want to do. High fats, medium amounts of protein, and low in carbohydrate. And all those foods across those 3 groups should be natural foods as best they can be. And we know they're natural because they don't need labels. A piece of salmon or a piece of steak doesn't need a label. A packet of donuts does. So that's the big clue. And talking about carbohydrates in particular, again, we don't have time to go into this. I'll do another video on it. We have to think about how much carbohydrate we're going to eat every day and keep a track of it. And I would call it a daily target, if you prefer, your daily budget for carbohydrates. And that's going to depend on whether you're going to count total carbohydrates, net carbohydrates. It's a bit more involved, this. And then also where you are in terms of as an individual. male, female, weight, BMI range, if you like, age, amount of exercise. All these things go into determining what your carbohydrate budget should be every day. I certainly have one, and I do keep just a mental check on it. I don't write it all down. No, I don't. But I do keep a mental check on what I'm eating. So there's the diet. And then what we should be avoiding, do our very best to avoid, are processed foods. These are, they're processed because they have a label. And we have to remember, of course, though, that about 70% of foods in our shops will be processed. So it gets quite hard work to avoid these things, but that's the aim. That's what we're trying to do. And I'll give you a list of 5 more things just to minimize. Avoiding these, I realize, is probably just not realistic, but minimizing as best you can would be a very good idea. First is grains. That's wheat, oats, rice. Avoid the grains as best you can. They're full of sugar and they spike your blood sugar and protein. The second one is potato. Yep, I love potatoes too. I love chips, but no, I'm sorry. We need to minimize as best you can do because it's full of starch, which is sugar. The third one is sugar itself. Sugar in biscuits, sugar on cakes. Avoid that as much as you can do. High glycemic fruit, what are called GI fruit, in other words, fruit which has a lot of sugar in it. Again, that spikes your blood sugar. And then finally, sorry about this, the 5th one is minimize alcohol. Miserable, I'm sorry, but again, that's full of sugar. If you've got to drink something, just a small amount of red wine is good. And also sugary colas, fizzy drinks, full of sugar. And even if you have the diet variants, what they do, as soon as you start drinking a diet, whatever it might be, the body is tricked into thinking it's actually full of sugar, even though it isn't, and it starts releasing all the insulin to the body. It has the same effect. So what I've learned over the last year or so is several things, and I hope I can pass this on to you so you can get ahead and move ahead fast on this, is that eat fats, as I've just said a few minutes ago about having a lot of fat in your diet. Eat healthy fats. They're good for you. They are good for you. Eat the skin on chicken. Eat the fat on meat. It's all good for you. It's all natural, healthy fats. The next one is the single biggest, best thing I did was actually to cut right down on wheat. Wheat is, quite frankly, I think it's dreadful stuff. I used to eat loads of it in bread, pasta, whatever, but I'm trying to minimize the best I can do. Because it's very fattening, it's addictive, it gives us brain fogs. Try and reduce it as much as you can do. Avoid processed foods because they're packed full of sugar and refined wheat. That's how they bulk these things out very often. And also, I'd avoid foods which are described on the label as being light or low fat. Because what they're doing, yes, they are taking the fat out because that's what people want mistakenly. But this goes back a lot of years now, people thinking this. And they take the fat out, what they replace it with? Sugar. That's what they're doing. So avoid your processed foods and really just avoid foods, as I've said already, with labels. Now, by doing some of these things I've just described to you, it is perfectly viable to get yourself into remission for most of us. Most of us can get into remission. It doesn't happen overnight, but the more active you are in reducing the amount of carbohydrates, the faster that will happen. Over the first couple of months of me after I was diagnosed, without fully understanding in detail what I needed to do, I could reduce my sugar count by about 2 to 3 millimoles per week. So about 10 a month. That's UK measurements. When you change your diet, as I've been talking about here, and this is just worth remembering, there will be a hunger effect. It only lasts for 3 or 4 days, and then your body adapts very quickly to it. It's surprising. And another video I'll talk about fasting. Again, that has the same situation. But if you've been doing it for 3 or 4 days and the body's starting to adapt to your new routine, if you then have a big binge, a big blow over a weekend or something, you're back to square one, back to the start all over again. So that's worth remembering, please. Okay, that's what I want to cover for this evening. But I want to be of some more help to you, and this hopefully will be of help and be of interest to some people here. Every month I do a live workshop. Now it's a bit like this, but it's much longer, in more detail. It goes on for at least 2 hours, depends how many people attend and how many questions they ask. And it is normally on the 3rd Wednesday of every month, again at 6 p.m. UK time. So I cover all this and other subjects in a lot more detail. Diet that we've covered here to some extent, exercise, fasting, lifestyle, and how we monitor our progress. Now you need to register for this, and I'll put the link to the registration page in the description below here. And I do charge a small fee for this. It's not very much at all, but I'll tell you for why I do that. Because I'm looking for people to make a commitment to display and then make a commitment to show up and learn stuff about how to improve their health. I did just the same. I was signing up for stuff, and I knew because I paid a bit of money to it, I was going to be there and learn. So that's why I do it. As I say, the description will be, the joining page will be in the description below. Okay. I hope you found this useful, and I wish you all the best of health. Let's see if we have any questions. No questions. So we will call it a day there. Thank you very much, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.